Sigmund Freud was born on May 6, 1856, in Freiburg in Mähren, Moravia, in the Austrian Empire. Freud's work was heavily influenced by his cultural background and Jewish intellectualism, which suggests that the practice of Judaism is the epitome of mental health, as well as moral and intellectual superiority. Freud began his career in neurological research. In the field of neurology during Freud's time period, the psychological reasonings behind behavior was not considered to be important, as behavior was seen as just a set of symptoms meant to be studied in order to comprehend the structures of the human brain. His work restructured this attitude. Referring to his belief that most of the conscious mind is dictated by the unconscious, Freud once said,
"The mind is like an iceberg. It floats with only 1/7 of its bulk above water."
Psychoanalysis was first coined by Sigmund Freud circa 1900. The basis of psychoanalytic theory is understanding the impact that the unconscious mind has on the conscious mind in terms of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. It is a tool that works to exploit the unconscious mind in order to relieve past traumas and painful suppressed emotions to increase self-awareness.
The basis of Freud's conjecture argued that personality is formed through conflicts among three fundamental structures of the human mind, known as ID, ego, and superego.
ID refers to one's personality and is made up of unconscious psychic energy that seeks to satisfy basic urges, necessities, and desires. It operates on the pleasure principle, which dictates immediate satisfaction of needs. Ego refers to the conscious mind and how individuals interact with the external world, as well as how one responds to internal forces and conflicts.
The last fundamental structure is known as the superego, which is the personality component that is comprised of our internalized ideals acquired from our upbringings, as well as sociological aspects. It works to suppress the urges of our ID and attempts to make the ego behave morally as opposed to realistically. A principal assumption of Freudian theory is that the unconscious mind governs one's behavior to a much higher degree than people recognize.
Freud hypothesized that the personality is formed during early childhood, and mental illnesses occur when negative or unpleasant childhood experiences are kept from consciousness or repressed because they are painful to think about and relive. These main structures of the human mind help us in understanding the psychology of the brain and how people behave in lieu of different traumatic childhood memories and how the different mental illnesses manifest themselves, as exemplified by Freud's theory of dream interpretation.
Freud conducted experiments with Joseph Breuer that demonstrated how hysterical symptoms could consistently be related back to highly emotional or traumatic experiences that had been repressed from conscious memory. Freud conducted his own self-analysis, which he primarily pursued by analyzing his own dreams. Consequently, he developed a greater sense of inner security while his impulsive emotional responses decreased. This suggested that the dreams of man served as a road to understanding unconscious mental processes which have great significance in determining behavior. He asserted that dreams are the brain's way of fulfilling unconscious wishes. Sexual and aggressive urges that the conscious mind deems immoral are repressed subconsciously and symbolically expressed through dreams.
Freud compiled his findings in a book which he titled The Interpretation of Dreams.
In the pages that follow, I shall bring forward proof that there is a psychological technique which makes it possible to interpret dreams.
The book goes into detail about his theory that dreams are key in understanding unconscious mental processes and their impact on behavior. Freud famously described dreams as the royal road to the unconscious. The development of psychoanalytic theory led Freud to revolutionize psychological therapy and treatment methods by applying his principles in psychiatric practice in what is commonly known as psychoanalytic therapy. It has greatly affected the way modern psychiatrists and neurologists view behavior in relation to mental illnesses.
Originally, Freud studied hypnosis as a cure for hysterical patients who were suffering from a highly emotional experience that had been repressed from the conscious memory. However, as he studied psychoanalysis in greater detail, he developed therapy styles that were more relational between doctor and patient. Freud is essentially the father of modern psychiatric therapy.
Freud's relational therapy options are shown to help patients who have had poor experiences with relationships in the past, especially with parental relationships. The most common form of this type of treatment is free association, where the patient is encouraged to talk without interruption about anything that comes to them without editing their thoughts to be publicly appropriate. The therapist then utilizes neutrality, where they do not show any reactions to what they hear so as to distract the patient.
The therapist is meant to pay very close attention to the patient's free associations and listen for hidden meanings and Freudian slips, or slips of the tongue, that could reveal unconscious conflicts.
This method works well because the patient can adjust himself or herself in different ways to ensure their maximum comfort when talking about deep, personal, and often negative feelings. For example, the positioning of the chairs during sessions can have a huge impact on a patient's progress in treatment. Angling the patient's chair away from the therapist allows the patient to focus on what they are saying instead of being distracted by the therapist's facial expressions and reactions to his or her words, which also helps the therapist maintain neutrality in reaction to the patient's revelations.
Freudian theories are also put into practice using transference and countertransference. These concepts allow the patient to open up to their therapist about their feelings. In transference, the patient sees the therapist as someone with whom they have a relationship with other than a doctor and patient, and elicits a variety of feelings towards the therapist, both positive and negative. In response, the therapist uses countertransference, which is their emotional reaction to the patient in treatment sessions.
Dream analysis is another Freudian method, which is when a patient in therapy reports their dreams, and the therapist helps them look past the obvious explanation and interpret the symbolic meanings behind the manifestation of the dream.
Currently, only a small fraction of therapists in the United States utilize psychoanalysis as their principal form of treatment, as most analysts use contemporary approaches to classical Freudian psychology. Therapeutic relationships now tend to be more interactive and focus on the function of the ego and current issues in an individual's life, as opposed to the ID and early childhood experiences.
Freud also described highly controversial views regarding infantile sexuality in his later written works. This describes his psychosexual theory of development, a sister to psychoanalysis. It proposed that the psychological development in childhood occurs in a series of fixed psychosexual stages: oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital. Each of these stages represents the compulsion of sexual libido on a different area of the body, and as a person grows, certain areas of the body become sources of potential erogenous zones and/or pleasure. For example, the oral stage, ages 0 to 1, is centered in a baby's mouth, as infants gain satisfaction from putting things in their mouth, such as breastfeeding, biting, and sucking. It suggests that oral stimulation can lead to other oral fixations later in life, such as smoking, nail biting, and thumb sucking, especially while under stress.
As the proprietor of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud's work was revolutionary in the way he restructured the attitude towards behavior in relation to mental illnesses. The development of psychoanalytic theory transformed psychological therapy and treatment methods, which consequently altered the way modern psychiatrists and neurologists view behavior in relation to mental illnesses. The psychological world would not be what it is today without the contributions of Sigmund Freud.
Thank you.